On Monday. We're very happy to have with us today Victor Diaz from Realm School. I have a few just the boilerplate things, and then I'll say something else. So Victor Diaz is the Executive Director of Realm Charter School. Victor graduated from UCLA, holds a JD from New College of California School of Law, and a teaching credential and Master of Education in Instructional Technology from the University of San Francisco. Victor has been working in public education for more than 17 years as a classroom teacher, principal, and founder of 2 charter schools in Berkeley. I got to know Victor when he took part in a course I was leading many years ago, too many years ago. It was a course called Cognitive Ergonomics, and bringing a learning sciences perspective to understanding the role of artifacts, technology writ large in creating opportunities for students to learn content in deep and meaningful ways. And already then I was very much struck by Victor's rare combination of passion, of activism and vision on the one hand, but at the same time being very much grounded in the learning sciences. Because often we see people who are doing one but not the other, and sometimes it's not as effective as the work that Victor does, where he's informed by the literature and working in the field, and for me embodies one of these people who is a very important resource for the community of researchers and practitioners, as a liaison person who knows both worlds and nurtures from them and feeds back into them. So I'm really excited to have this for your presentation today, so please join me in welcoming Victor.
Thank you. Thank you. You guys seem so far away back there. Thanks for moving forward, I appreciate that. Yeah, if you don't mind moving forward, so we can engage and debate and argue and disagree, and it'll be better if we're closer while we do that.
Sorry.
Cheers, babe.
How's that camera?
I'm gonna move around. Is that okay if I move around for you?
Yeah.
I'll try to save
Excellent.
this area. So thanks for having me, School of Ed, Cognitive Sciences. Thank you guys for having me. The list that you have of previous speakers, I don't even deserve to be on that. You guys had some pretty impressive people, so I'll do my best today. But before I begin, I'd like to, since we're a manageable size group, could I hear from who's in the room, maybe your name, what are you doing here at UC Berkeley? Let's see. Your name, what do you do here at UC Berkeley? And why are you here? What are you hoping to argue with me about, or prove yourself right or wrong, or maybe learn? I don't know, something like that. What if I start with Jalisco? I saw your bottle, that's why.
My name is Diana Villanes, second year PhD student here in Social and Cultural Studies. And I guess what brought me to your talk today, I just wanted to know more about where you were going to be presenting in terms of how you were going to define love. And so that's kind of what brought me to this room today.
Wonderful, thank you. Can we just go this way? We'll zigzag. Then we'll go to the back.
Gemma Cardona, VNA, I'm also second year in the Social and Cultural Studies program. I was also very interested in how you conceptualize your notion of love, particularly because my work focuses a lot on healing. So not directly on love, but healing. So I wanted to maybe see how that can inform my understanding of some of the work in healing.
Healing in the psychosocial sense?
No, more sort of looking from a decolonial.
Okay, so not
perspective
trauma,
lens.
but okay.
Hello, my name is Hong Zhang from China, and I'm a visiting scholar here in School of Education, and I'm also a volunteer in the Realm Charter School, so I just came here and to know more about the school.
Hi, my name is Silvan. I'm also a visiting scholar from Germany, and visiting NUSS here, do some research, and Yeah, I don't know. Your title was quite interesting to me. So I'm into science education, and I couldn't expect anything from it. So that's why.
Okay. As a side note, we've had 2 international students. I'm not even sure how they found me. They were both from Germany, which is weird. So maybe we have to have a beer, figure it out or something.
I'm Anna. I'm first year in the EMST program, which is a PhD in math education. And you know, this is like part of our class, so I'm here because I have to be here. But I will say that your
Appreciate the honesty.
I'm going to add to that.
Friends already.
Your talk, you said you're honored to be on the list of scholars. I think I'm most interested in what you have to say because you are an actual teacher and school runner, so that seems great too.
Are you also a credentialed teacher?
I taught for a while. I don't have a credential because I taught in a private school, but
Okay.
yeah.
But you've been classroom?
Yes.
Okay. I was going to take that poll later, but okay.
Hi, I'm Anna. I'm also a first year graduate student here, well, in a slightly different program. I think everything Anna said applies to me as well, so.
Okay. Okay. Especially the arm twisting.
No, I mean, well, I could also say I come from the snacks, but that's not really
They
important.
better. Although they can do a better job than that. We'll complain
But
later.
no, I'm really looking forward to hear more school perspective as well.
Great.
Hi, my name is Elena. I am a first year in Sesame. That's a PhD program in science, mathematics, and engineering education. And well, I'm here because as a first year, I'm trying to learn everything I can in order to be able to define what I like to do.
Okay. Okay. Wonderful. Thank you. How about you, Chelsea?
Hi, I'm Elon. I'm a second year Sesame student. This is my second year of having to come to these events, but I'm really interested actually in charter school, so I'm happy to hear about this.
Okay. Good.
My name is Beatrice. I am a second year. Actually, like we managed to like make a perfect row. Second year Sesame is here. So I mean, besides the part of it, you occasionally skip, and I chose not to skip this one. I actually find the idea of building a school community, like that you said in your title, kind of interesting, because while I'm more interested in college-level education, I feel like there's sometimes less of a focus on building community, but at the same time, you are trying to make classes that are often fairly large and have multiple instructors into somewhat of a community with like widespread learning goals. And I think it's interesting to see the correlations or like what we can borrow from like the more kind of traditional like K through 12 education system, like, or untraditional in your case. Like I think it's interesting because I don't know if people make those correlations sometimes, and there might be more ties there that are immediately said rather than saying college and K through 12 should be very distinctively different.
Okay. Thank you.
I'm Beth. I'm a second year in Sesame, focusing on educational technology. And I'm also here because I come every Monday. But I also worked with Girls from Realm at the Girls for Engineering program that was here on campus, so I'm interested in.
Just past summer.
Yeah.
Okay. With Claire?
Yep.
Okay. Awesome.
Hi, I'm Annie, and I'm in the school psychology program. I'm here because I really love your language. My background's in counseling. I used to run youth programs through community agencies, and I also taught the arts, so I really love the idea of the community and action and love and all those lofty words, and I'm interested to see how you put all that into action and what it looks like on the ground.
Thank you.
I'm Kenna. I'm also in the school psychology program here. I was a high school teacher for 5 years and worked in charter schools as well as traditional public schools. And I'm really interested in community. I worked as a mentor for a long time and just been amazed at how connection can really be a transformative force for kids who you otherwise think you have no chance of reaching and aren't going to have positive outcomes. So I'm interested to see how you weave all of your pieces together and maybe get some tips and tricks that I can take into my future work.
Okay. Putting pressure on me?
Hi, I'm Marcia Lynn. I'm a faculty member here, and I'm really interested in using technology to enhance every aspect of the instructional process, and especially gathering indicators of student learning that teachers can use to personalize and customize their instruction to different groups of learners.
Okay, thank you. All right, well, I think I'm in the right room. I mean, I hope to touch on much of what you guys have brought up. So who has been a classroom teacher? Okay. And then, oh, I'm sorry, I didn't get you two. So you guys are both. See, that's what happens when we start them. Sorry. Okay, you are.
Okay. My name is Ellen. I'm in a master's in credentialing program to be a secondary math teacher. So, and I'm also really interested in social justice in education, and so very interested in the realm school and learning about how to incorporate Common Core and like how different teachers have used it in their classrooms and manage it. Yeah, so I'm interested in a lot.
Okay, thank you.
I'm Virginia. I'm a second-year PhD student interested in mathematics learning and interested in.
Good, good. Thank you both. Sorry to
Oh,
have briefly waited. And you're close enough to kick me, so I'm glad I caught that in time. Okay, well, I'm really honored to be here. It's great. Thank you, Dora, for that introduction. It was very kind of you. And unfortunately, you know, a big part of my brain seems to have withered away. You know, it's great to be in an intellectual setting and to keep that side of my brain working. And it's been a little while, so. So that being said, I love when there are disruptors and people who come with a set of ideas and experiences and challenge. You know, so I hope you challenge your previous speakers, and if not, I hope after today you will challenge me and anybody else who follows. Okay. So I want to show you just kind of briefly the work that we're doing at Realm, and hopefully we'll be in conversation. Because there's some things that we do really well. We've figured them out much quicker than I thought we would, and there are some things that I'm still really perplexed about. So I will be really transparent about that, where we are in our own arc. Certainly mathematics is one of those areas. Prior to opening the school, I was visiting a lot of secondary schools who claim to be project-based learning schools, and their mathematics scores were terrible. By any measure, both just by walking around and anecdotally seeing kids disengaged to test scores and API scores of public schools. And so, you know, now having been in our 4th year of operation, I can see what some of those factors still are. So I'll probably hopefully be able to discuss some of those things. Okay. So just kind of a quick overview. I'm going to just again give you a real quick. If you haven't seen our website, because this video is up there, let me say it this way. If you've seen the video, sorry to bore you. I'm going to show you just a really short little video, just so you can get a. It's always great to see kids and kids' faces. It'll help my evaluation at the end of the night tonight go up by like 4 stars when we see kids. So I'll show you just a short little video so you can see kind of who attends the school, what the school looks like, and kind of how we package ourselves. And then let's see. And then I do have like 3 specific people that I brought with me in story to share with you about some of the work that we're doing, and hopefully their stories will inspire. And then hopefully you can be in conversation about it. Okay. So I'll show you actually I'll probably show you both short little videos just so we can close this thing up. Can you see okay in the back?
It would be so easy if I handed every kid a 500-page textbook and said, start on page 1, and in June, you'll be on page 500. I had a prospective student, he was excited about coming to a school where he could try some of these crazy things, and he would find, you know, teachers and peers and friends and a principal that would be just as excited as he is. If you look at a lot of great schools around the country, they operate from the premise that children walk into our doors with a ton of genius already. So our job as adults is, number 1, to not be afraid of that, and number 2, to find as many ways to stimulate that. For me, the ideal student is a kid who comes to the school with a great deal of curiosity and finds the time and the space and the resources and the adults around to nurture that curiosity, to expand on that curiosity, to challenge that curiosity. They're coming into this space with their hand in the air saying, I want to explore and learn from others. Sometimes that's the beauty of the space. You can it's almost like watching a toddler learn how to walk for the first time. I think unfortunate about public ed is it doesn't reinvent itself frequently enough. And that's really unfortunate. And I think that's part of what leads to dispassionate people. In my fantasy world, I wish that public education could be more agile and more innovative, and do that with a greater ferocity, so that it was leading with innovation and change and ideas. The task of getting it done feels more doable because we have these relationships that we've formed over the year. Relationships are forming so naturally and so beautifully, and they're based really on one common principle around giving our students unconditional love and support to be the best that they can be. This school is really turning out to be this place that needs to happen in this city at this time with these kids and these teachers. And it is creating a new narrative about what a community can build together if the efforts are all aligned together.
Okay, that's our little piece we have on our site. So we are a public charter school located in Berkeley, a middle school and a high school. We opened up, we're starting our 4th year. We are a middle school and a high school. And we currently have, and for the first time, we actually have kids in grades 6 all the way through 12 on 2 different campuses. So on one hand, and I won't bore you with all of the details of opening a charter school, operating essentially as a business on the back end of what happens behind the classroom scenes. We are this place of learning and exchanging ideas. So I opened the school in response to having worked, I worked primarily, or before I opened the school, I worked primarily in secondary education and mostly in continuation schools. And I was working with schools both in San Francisco and in Boston public schools with older age youth and youth that had been traditionally kicked out of high school and experiencing kind of a last chance high school. So that's both where I taught and where I was a principal. And I loved that work, and I was very excited and motivated by that work. And then I came to Berkeley in 2005. I met Dor shortly thereafter. And I still came with this idealism, like, you know, I could somehow transform kids, you know, even if they were 17, 18 years old with a month to go in school, somehow I could work some magic and they would come out, you know, at the other end and be these remarkable citizens. And very shortly after I came to Berkeley, I realized both that where we were sort of dragging them across the finish line just wasn't far enough, and then B, that it was happening in a city that was like rich in resources, intellectual, financial, a lot of cultural capital in Berkeley. So then, for the first time in my, at that point, probably like 10-year career, I started asking myself, you know, like, what the hell's going on? Like, why are we seeing generations and generations? And it also happened that I was meeting second-generation kids of parents who attended the continuation school in Berkeley when they were in high school. And that was the first time in my educational career that I was meeting, like, the second generation of kids, right? So that was also kind of, you know, it really reduced me, like, intellectually and professionally. I felt like, wow, like, my work isn't having that much of an impact. And I just felt like I had more to give, and that I could do more, that I knew people in disparate classrooms and cities and professors who kind of collectively, we can bring some of that brain power together. Maybe we could intervene sooner and do more. And so it was kind of from that audacious idea that the birth of the charter school happened. And as I started to verbalize that and say we need to do something a little bit different, I started asking the question, like, naturally, what must that program have if it's going to really be better, you know? So there was a long, really boring narrative that I wrote for the charter to get it approved, and pretty much no one read it but the school district. I don't even think they read it, actually. And at some point, I had to kind of distill that down to a message that I could talk to teachers and families and students about in terms of why they should come to the school and what they'll be doing when they're there. So I thought about my work and the research and the success and failures that I had along the way. And simply I said, if kids are not known, if kids don't have meaningful relationships, it doesn't matter what's going on, they're not going to want to be in school. And then some kids, and maybe this was true for you all in school, those that were high achieving and went to really high performing schools, may have been to schools where you didn't really have any adults that knew you or cared about you, and you found other ways to just negotiate that system, so to speak, right? So, i.e., if you look at the park right outside of Berkeley High School, like pretty much any time during the day, and you see, some really probably high achieving, high functioning kids out of class, riding their skateboards, right? Have you guys seen those kids out there? And I think many of those kids are probably lacking that connection either in their own home, in their community, and then most certainly in school. And so, how you doing? And so I knew that was a basic premise, that relationships have to be authentic, they have to be real, and they have to be the foundation, both of what we communicated to kids and then certainly of the staff that we were hiring. So that's where the word love came from. And then second, the thing that got me in trouble, I think in this very classroom, I remember in one of Jabari's classes, I said something really dumb and probably pissed off people for, I think it was somebody that was talking about a Tupac poem or something, maybe it was even Ferguson, I don't know. I feel like sometimes we get kind of hunkered down and where we think that kids have to have everything that's culturally relevant and has to be couched in popular culture. You guys know what I mean about that? You guys with me on that? Like everything has to be like contemporary and like Afrocentric or indigenous language. And kids are much bigger than that. Their imaginations are much bigger than that. And I feel like sometimes we lower the expectations by thinking it's like, let's talk to them first about, slavery, and then, or let's talk to them first about Tupac, and then once they get excited about Tupac, then maybe we can talk to them about slavery, or, and they go through that and maybe you've never even read like Zora Neale Hurston, or, they don't go beyond that. They kind of stay in that sort of like, are you guys with me on that? Am I the only one that's experienced that? Okay. So in knowing that there was a set of individuals, educators, who were really great at forming relationships, many of them had difficulty in setting high expectations. And so similarly, kids were used to being told, here, I'm done, and teachers saying, you got a paragraph, that's great, so I'll take that. Right? And then the teacher was done with you, and the kid was done. And so, to me, the word grit was something that said we all have to push past that point of just accepting that first iteration, that first kind of expectation, right? And that, like, I remember one of the beautiful things about Door's class is he said, here's some stuff, play with it, and then keep playing with it, and then keep playing with it. Right? And that was one of the first times that I experienced that process could be really beautiful, that we can talk about our learning along the way, and that many solutions can come out of that. Right? And I would have missed the excitement of that intellectual rigor if I would have said, here's my thing, it's done. And if you would have said, oh, that's great. Thank you, I'll see you at the end of the semester, right? So we needed adults that could push past that, and hence the phrase grit. And finally, it was important for me to get kids not just to college, but to have them starting their college career with a sense of dignity and purpose, and being able to get through college really focused on what are those things that make them as individuals. And so the word action just to me seemed like the thing that we want kids to constantly be asking themselves, what can I do with the thing that I'm learning, and how can I put that into action outside of the things that are personal just to me, but for the community at large. Okay? And so that's kind of how the principles of the school came to be. And those are the things that we're focusing on. And I'll just give you 3 really quick snapshots of specific students that make me think about each of those. We have a young Latina at our school who just a couple weeks ago, we have our first senior class now. We've never even had, we're 2 months into our first senior class. And I walked into the lobby, and she's in the lobby with another student and another teacher, and she's crying. And in the 3.5 years 3 years and 2 months that we've had her, it was the first time that she admitted to both her friends and to the teachers that she's not a citizen of the U.S. And so while everybody's talking in the class, like, what college are you going to go to? What college are you going to apply to? She's there thinking, how do I hold the shame of not being a U.S. citizen? And unfortunately, she's from a country where you don't blare out and say, my parents brought me here when I was 2, you know? So she had enough belief in the school, and the school had enough belief and support in place for her that we started bringing people around her, other Latinos who were DREAM Act students, one who's currently a DREAM Act student at San Francisco State, and begin to start to work with her and her family about how she will be able to make that transition. And so we do that, and we can do that because we've created this space where, you know, there are adults there that she can connect with. There's structured space in our advisory classes where they're led by women for young women and by men on campus for young guys, where we can have those kinds of conversations. Versus, if you've worked with kids on campus, you know that those are the kind of things that can sometimes have kids where they just don't return to school and stop coming to school. And we know that that is a contributing factor for many Latino students, some Southeast Asian students, and other kids whose parents brought them here at a young age. So she is a recent example of a student who I believe will flourish because of the relationships that she's formed, and that we have people on staff who are trained and who have enough technical experience to help her navigate what is both a political and a legal climate that she and her family is going to have to go through, because we're also going to ask her mother to sign forms. So how do you get a family to say, okay, sure, you know, we're not here legally, right? There's a lot of trepidation that will come with that, if you can imagine, especially in this East Bay corridor where we know that ICE has made a lot of raids in families here in Oakland and Berkeley and in Richmond, okay? And so that's the climate that we want to work with, because we have to both prepare her intellectually and culturally and socially to be ready for her next move. And so those are the things, that's one of the things that we do really well, especially in relationship to this young woman. When I think of grit, we just started a new class. It's an entrepreneurial class. It's taught by a student who was an undergrad student here and was a Berkeley High student, did his undergrad here, did his MBA out at Oxford, and not a credentialed teacher. And because we're a charter school, we can hire him. He's been our pre-calc and now our calculus teacher. And we were talking about how there's so much work that needs to happen at the school. There's so many things that the kids don't have that they still want, sports-related, social activity-related, prom, and those kinds of things. And so we decided to teach this entrepreneurship class, and he kind of took this long list of things that the kids wanted in school, and then went through the process of talking about how they would go about, you know, acquiring some of those things. So he has them now writing business plans and things like this. So just made me think the other day I was driving, and you can see our outdoor grass area if you go up or down University. We're between Curtis and Bonar on University, the high school is. So anyway, I'm driving from my middle school campus to the high school campus, and I'm parking. I see these 2 boys out on the grass, and they're wearing shirts and ties, and they have this flag that's like about 10 feet in the air. And they somehow managed to negotiate with some pretty cheesy energy drink vendor. I'm not sure how they even made this connection. But they have like a table, and they have like what is that called, the little curtain around the table, and they've got their shirts and ties on. They're selling energy drinks at lunchtime, which we probably should have checked the ingredients, because, I mean, who knows what the hell are the ingredients of these drinks. But they actually pitched their idea to this vendor. They were able to like figure out that they needed to negotiate a product and the markup, and then where these, so they had a whole proposal that they had presented to the principal about what they would do with these resources. And so their whole pitch was that they wanted kids to do better in class, after lunch, or just when kids get bored and tired. So I thought it was pretty creative, and it deserved at least for them to at least try their thing out. But anyhow, it definitely demonstrated to kids that when you're a teenager, the word no and having conflict was going to be kind of synonymous with being a teenager, right? Adults just constantly saying, you can't do that. And what we want to encourage our kids is, how do you navigate through that productively, constructively, in a way that's just beyond your own individual needs? And that's a hard thing for teenagers to look beyond, but that's the thing that we're in constant conversation with them about, okay? And finally, I do want to share with you a program that we're really excited about, our Studio H program. It's a design-build program. If you don't know it, they're far more famous than our school is at this point, and they were recently in North Carolina. They're called Studio H. They were in North Carolina for a couple of years. They built a 3,000 square foot farmer's market. The 2 teachers, and like 10 high school students. And that was their final product, right? This living, breathing, beautiful architecture that's sitting in the middle of Bertie County in rural North Carolina. There have been a lot of architectural features of it, and there's been a full-length movie made about it. And it demonstrated what kids and motivated and strong teachers can do to change a community. And so when I saw these 2 individuals and the work that they were doing, we hadn't even opened up yet, the school. And I knew immediately that that was the kind of program that I wanted my kids to be involved in. So it took me about 1.5 years to recruit these 2 to come to our school. And then, I don't know, what, serendipitously or by an act of God or whatever, they were having problems in North Carolina. So it was just like the perfect storm. And so I pitched them, the sun and the moon and the stars, and they finally came. And they have a full program, an architectural design build program. It started out just in the high school, and now it goes 6 through 12. And there's variations of it. But what's so beautiful about it is, and when you see our little 6th graders now, they're going to build 2 tiny homes this spring. And probably within the next 2 months, you'll probably see them on these trailers, because these tiny homes sit on trailers that are, I think, 8 by 16, 8 feet by 16 feet. We're going to build 2 of them. They'll be out there'll be a construction site on our grass closer to the Curtis and University corner. In the teachers' research, because we were going to gift them to a family in Berkeley, and we found out there was all kinds of zoning laws that make gifting something like that difficult, believe it or not. We found a tiny home trailer park in Oregon that works with transitional families, and they provide housing, job training, daycare for families that are transitioning. And so we're going to gift them one of these homes when they're built. And then we're going to auction the other for materials for the next year and try to complete this project every year. So let me just tell a little bit about the process. So the kids begin by looking at precedent studies of tiny homes and even go further in looking at materials, functions. So they really delve deeply into what is the function of this tiny home. They look at housing as an industry, as an architecture, as a cultural capital, and what does it take to get those, who owns them, who doesn't. And so you can see that in these conversations, there are teachers that are, when they hear our teachers talking about these projects, you can, if you're a math or a science teacher, don't you start seeing ways in which you'd want to collaborate? Those, right? You can see how you can start generating ideas. And so we created a lot of professional time for them to collaborate professionally. And so this is an example of a project where we have kids thinking about how their ideas, their work, their craft can help impact our immediate school community in the form of this auction, and certainly communities at large. Last year they did a shipping container project that they brought in 3 shipping containers, and they went through a similar process of precedent studies. They do some 2D and then some line drawing and then some 3D modeling and then some model making. And then they go through a process of honing down their ideas to come up with a single idea. And then that's the idea that gets built, usually in the following quarter or following semester. So that shipping container project was about, I want to say a little less than 300 square feet, and it was 3 shipping containers. We built it without asking for permission. This was on the Berkeley Unified School District property. Unfortunately, the district came and said, that's not a DSA approved, Department of the Architect approved structure, and you got to get it out. So the idea at the time wasn't to gift it, but we ended up gifting it to the Crucible in Oakland, which is a place where they teach craft, a lot of different kinds of crafts in Oakland. So, so our shipping container is there, and it's being used for teenagers and adults in their space to do outdoor craft and stuff. But it was completely designed and built by our students. So those are 2 examples of where we put kids in a position where an idea that would normally be considered stupid, audacious, that they can actually start to verbalize. And then through that process of verbalizing it, there are teachers in the space that can show them how to put craft, technique, physics, mathematics, and other things into that to make it a real living thing that can then be transformed. They can help transform a school community or another community. So that's my 3rd story on how we put our kids in spaces to be action oriented. So I'll pause there for a second. How are you guys doing with that info? Any questions? Any thoughts? Any dissension? Yes.
Yes. Just with like that big project, like the shipping container project or the housing project, like how many kids do you have working on that, and how do you negotiate like individual idea contribution with the group work effort?
So the tiny home project, there's a narrative thread that's going from our 6th grade class all the way through our 12th grade class. And so at each level, they're having some input into the design and build of it. So our 6th graders, and it's not like smoke and mirrors. I mean, the 6th graders know they're not going to build it, but they went through the process of, they did a little precedent studies, and they did some model making, they did some presentations, and then the class votes on ideas, and then that gets sent up to the high school advanced design team. And like you all here, they'll have like student work up that they'll look at, and they may draw some ideas from it. But the kids were actually like sourcing material for the roof, for the structure, where windows might be and things like that. They did a lot of this work, so it goes from just kind of like hand to paper line drawing into SketchUp, and so it gets a little bit more accurate with some of their proportions. And then they can go even further as they do in our high school. There's access to AutoCAD and things like that. So there are different versions where different classes are participating at different levels, but the advanced class, that's always a point of tension, but that's the same of any design studio, right? It's like at some point you have to narrow it down, and there are things that make the best, right? So the best could mean it fits in the budget. The best could mean it works with like where it's going to be located. Like in the case of Oregon, they gave them parameters about like what it could and could not have, right? Or need and not need from the place where it's going to sit. So all those things have to be factored into the final sort of best drawing. And they'll go through that process. And it becomes less contentious the more they do it. So like some kids are just getting, they're at a place where it's like their light design, like where windows went and stuff, may have influenced the kind of roofing that was eventually selected or something like that. And they can see parts of their contributions into it. Okay?
I'm curious, like, it's really interesting, like, how is this woven in with, like, so is this like an extra class that they have, or like, is it like something that's incorporated into like their other subjects? Like, I'm curious what that like structure sort of looks like.
Yeah, so I think another way to say it is, people ask this all the time, is like, okay, what does that have to do with the standards?
Well, I don't care about that. I'm just curious what it looks like.
So the way our school is structured, teachers teach 4 periods, 4 roughly 60-minute periods, and they have 2 periods off during the day. And then we give them a little over 2 hours of professional development time every Wednesday. And then 2 of those Wednesdays, the teachers craft entirely on their own, like how they want to spend that afternoon time. So we try to be as flexible as we can with that time allotment. And that wasn't always the case. It took us a while to grow up to be in that place, and for me to actually also let go a little bit. But now they generate really amazing collaboration in those spaces, far better than I could have crafted. So that's part of how it gets shared. And so we have these days where, I call them kind of the disruptor day, where we try to be a little bit, we try to treat collaboration like a contact sport a little bit. You know what I mean? Because from that, if everybody's just agreeing, then like, is that the thing you want from your colleagues? Oh, that's great. Oh, that's great. Oh, that's great. You kind of get tired of hearing that. And so if I feel like there's too much agreement, I'll try to switch things up a little bit, right? So, we've done everything from like, we'll have a contest where we'll take a teacher who is willing to bring in her unit and would be willing to have it ripped up completely. Where like they have to agree that like that they planned it, and then second they have to agree that they're going to probably land. We're going to definitely land where she didn't expect to land, right? So like, I don't know, like a research paper or something like that, And then we'll come in and we'll see if we can generate like 100 different ideas, literally, different than the one that she may have up. Okay, and so we try to push in those spaces professionally to be disruptive. So we'll take the tiny home project and we'll say, like, who has a way to collaborate? Like, oh, I'll do research on, like, gentrification in the Mission. Like, okay, that's pretty good, but can we go deeper than that? And what might that look like? And then we just start, like, whipping out ideas. And as we throw them up there, other departments are hearing and seeing that, and then it's generating ideas for them also. So the short answer is we make the space to do that. The second part of it is that we are trying to learn from different fields about how to approach thinking, teaching and learning, brainstorming, and try to pull those ideas and how we collaborate from different fields. Yeah. Okay. Did you have a question?
It was like the same thing.
Okay.
So you were just talking about the teachers doing this, but I was under the impression that the students were supposed to be doing this. So I guess what I got from her question was, when do the students have time to do these extracurricular activities, besides preparing, let's say, for some test? So you were describing 2 days, 2 times a semester where the teachers...
Well, this is a class that they take.
Okay.
So they're in this class 5 days a week. And they're in this class, and then, like anything, there's a Gantt chart in their class right now. If you're familiar with construction documents, right? So it's a calendar for when this project needs to be done by. And so they're in their arc of their class, and the time is ticking. And if they're not meeting those deadlines, then guess what? The work is also happening before school, after school, things like that. And so I'm saying it's both things. It's teachers that are aligned either by grade level or by content that are also generating discussion and it's kind of a school-wide narrative about this thing coming up. And so then it starts to happen in more than one class. So my job is to move the pieces so that the conversation goes beyond the classroom, right? So it's not just one teacher saying, I have this great idea and I want to do this one project. And so what do we do kind of structurally, organizationally, to get more teachers talking about that project? Okay, so the time on task, they're doing it in the classroom. And if we can shake things up a little bit, then they're talking about it and doing more in other classes as well. That's the goal. Yeah.
Question, so when you were saying that in your teacher meetings you wanted to disrupt things and you had like disruption days and that whenever there was too much agreement, like you would shake things up, I'm wondering if that model is also incorporated like in the classroom with like the students. So the students are also sort of encouraged to disrupt.
Yeah, some more so than others. by certain teachers and not others. And so I would say is as like polished and slick as I'm making the school sound, there's times where the classes look very traditional, and we have teachers that struggle out of like, it's like textbook page 14, textbook page 15, and we try to break them from that a little bit. And so some are really great at it, some struggle with it. So similarly, like the teacher Lev, right? Now, I don't know if it's because he doesn't have a credential, that he'll come in and he'll just put a problem on the board and kind of like get out of the way. And then kids are in constant conflict and conversation about what to do next. So here's an example. He came to me and said, I have this kid in my calculus class who's just like doing all his homework. He's finishing his work really fast. I don't know what to do with this guy. And I was like, well, where does he struggle as a student? And he said, well, creativity. He's not really sure how to apply what he's learning in calculus, like outside of the class. So I said to him, and I was just being flippant. I didn't give it much thought, but I said, give him a blank piece of paper for homework. Like, just give him that and see what he does with it. And then so Lev looked at me and said, like, what do you mean? And I was like, I don't know what I mean, but what I think I mean is, he's going to ask you, what do I do with this piece of paper? And then you ask him, what's the one thing about this world that you like want to change, that you wish wasn't the way it is? That was the first thing that came to my mind. I mean, I guess you could have put anything on there, right? And this kid is like extremely brilliant. This kid came to me in 9th grade already knowing Java. Like this kid was like, his father's like a systems, does network system support. So then I said to Lev, I said, you can even have him like just like write that thing out and say to him, tomorrow you're going to teach that to the kids in the class, right? So that's your homework tonight, is be ready to teach that tomorrow, right? And so Lev gave him the homework assignment, because I checked in with Lev a couple days ago, and he had some question like, could computers be more human-like or something like that? I think that was his first reaction to that blank piece of paper. So I'm not sure where he's going to land or what he's going to teach, but I know that if this kid's name is Jordan, if Jordan's in front of the class, that there will be that kind of engagement, right? So that class looks amazing when you walk in, and if that's kind of what you think is good teaching, you know. But I have teachers that come in and there's no dissension, there's no disruption from kids. Teacher says, write these facts down, the kids are writing them down, you know. And so there isn't much of a challenge to issues and to the information being presented. So we're probably a little bit more than like 60% of the way there with our teachers. There's probably, I would say, 4 out of 10 teachers that struggle with that. So no one like stifles the idea or says to the kid, what are you saying, get out of here? No one says that, but they're not really, some are not sure what to do with that energy yet, or with that sort of early insert response yet. Some, yeah. Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So that what you were just talking about makes me wonder what your curriculum looks like, and how the teachers interact with it. This is not like a very well formed question, but like how do the teachers impact the curriculum or not?
Yeah, or the design of the curriculum.
Right.
So, well, this has been a really bumpy ride, because we came in the beginning. There was talk about Common Core, but if you've been in California public education long enough, you may have treated the talk about Common Core like you did a lot of other things previously. Like, yeah, right, that'll never happen. And when it does, it's going to come and go as fast as it, right? So many of us were thinking that with the Common Core. And so we were just kind of building stuff as we went. I paid teachers to come to work 3 weeks early before the start of school, which most schools only pay teachers like 2 days before the start of school. That's like the professional development run-up time. And so it was specifically for that reason, is to start building curricula. And as we got some footing with building curricula that on the periphery met the California standards of teaching, the CSTs, we then saw the reality of like NGSS, Common Core. So then there was kind of this like, people sat up really quickly, and then some ran to like textbook vendors right away. And so I can tell you now that our science and math teachers ran and grabbed textbooks right away. And that's where many of them live right now. And so we're trying to kind of pull them away from that a little bit. And we're also looking for really great ideas of curricula that can challenge the Common Core directly or indirectly, and give kids a really wonderful experience, and then pull back and see what does some of the research say about how kids are learning with something that's more around experimentation, problems, questions, things like that. So we're just kind of through a reset a little bit. The humanities folks pretty much always stayed on the periphery. There isn't much really pounding them by the way of Common Core. It's becoming more clear now, but for a while they could kind of sit on the periphery. So we broke down some writing types that we thought were essential at every grade level. We brought out some key texts that we thought were essential at every grade level, and then we looked at some data on where kids were stronger and weaker with regard to certain writing types and certain analytical skills, reading comprehension skills, and we kind of put those at different grade levels. And that's what we did with a lot of the humanities. Okay. Let me just do a quick check-in before I'll take yours next. How am I doing with you guys? Should I be more brief? Is there more or less? Okay, remember, you can jump in and just be like, that's BS if you want.
Are you going to show the videos after this session?
Another video?
The videos that you were going to show?
I do have one other. It's really quick. I can if you guys want. It was my version of technology. It's with bricks. But yes.
I saw on your website that you have a Peace and Conflict Studies program at your high school level.
Mm-hmm.
And I know, kind of relates to what you're talking about, but I know PACS, as a PACS major at Berkeley, I know that it's very problem-solving-esque. So I wanted to ask you, what does that look like at your school? Does it follow a similar program and model that Berkeley's program follows, or is it different?
You know, when I wrote the charter, I actually stole a lot of the narrative from the Peace and Conflict Studies program here and from some of Doerr's earlier classes around immersive technology. So those are, I would say they're like goals, like lofty things that we hope to accomplish. Because we have a really exceptional teacher in our Peace and Conflict Studies class, and he's really motivated, former student here. Where he's spent a lot of time recently is on this kind of like self-journey. They're reading what is the Corners of Miguel? It's a lot of self-reflection right now, right? He spent the first year creating this really beautiful reader and just looking at places where conflicts have been resolved sort of non-traditionally in ways in which we normally don't find them resolved in textbooks, i.e. wars. And so he found that most kids were struggling with a lot of internal conflict. So he's been spending a lot of time examining self, community, the conflict between trying to create sort of a reflective, transformative individual that lives in a community that's very violent. And so I would say that that's where most of the work is at right now. I know it's probably a terrible answer. Yeah, that's about all the information I have, I think, on that class right now. The goals of the class really were kind of just to examine what has normally been kind of like looking at histories of conflict, and then just trying to present a counter narrative to that, right? That there were people on both sides that were looking at ways in which they were both motivated to solve conflict, no matter the crisis. But I know that we haven't gotten quite all the way there yet. Okay, but let me say one other thing about that, just real quickly. That very same teacher, he's in the last 2 years has taken kids to Guatemala at the end of each summer. So part of their Peace and Conflict Studies classes is doing some of the work I mentioned, and then they spend 3 weeks in Guatemala over the summer as well. They're actually in Chiapas one summer, so that they're also traveling as well and talking to people, indigenous people that view these conflicts from an indigenous point of view, which is how do we work together to sustain both of our interests, right, in a compassionate way. And so he's there, and they're working with kids, teenagers directly in both of those countries, the last two countries they've been to. Okay, I'm sorry, you had your hand up?
No, I was just curious. You mentioned the Gantt charts that you have, and that students have certain things that they are expected to do. Do you work with more of an asynchronous model in all of your classes, especially now that there was kind of that run to understand that Common Core is for real, we actually have to do it, which I totally understand. I was in the classroom when that began to be the reality for New York. And also you mentioned briefly your advisory program. And so I'm just really curious what that looks like for you guys, having taught advisory myself and having gone between having very kind of prescriptive formats like an Avid program that I had to use and being able to kind of create my own that was much more organic and reflective of my students' needs. How do you envision advisory, and is that where more of the love comes, or is that love spread all over the place?
Yeah, we spread love all over the place. Well, you know, I guess the first part about sort of how we approach planning with regard to the Common Core, we don't plan where we begin with the standards. I'll just say that. And we're trying to be as student-centered in our creation of curricula as much as possible. So who's in front of us? What are their needs? Where are the gaps? How do we know that information? And that's the real challenge, especially the how do you know the information piece, right? Because sometimes, you know, your knowledge is only as good as your assessments. And so we're constantly tweaking the things that we're assessing. And we're also needing a ton of help around how we turn what have traditionally been a lot of these qualitative measures into something that we can do quicker snapshots, quantify it so we can get quicker time between what we're learning about them and then kind of mapping how we're doing. So that's an area where I would love to push back anybody who's interested in that area. Like, you know, so like one question I've had for the last 2 years, because I think we're so exceptional at the love piece, but you can put anything, there are a lot of terms synonymous with love piece, relationship building. You can take any of the Maslow's hierarchy, any of those kind of bottom rung things, and you can say, you can, you know, make those are all synonymous for us about the physiological, all of that stuff, right? And so I have no way to quantify that. And so those are things that I'm looking for schools of ed or researchers to say, you know, what would that instrument look like? What would some pre and post data look like? You know, in terms of like the span, what are some realistic goals? How far can you actually move kids? What's even plausible given the circumstances? I do know this, we have kids that, you know, we do some snapshots and some surveys with them, and, you know, the marks we get, you know, around kind of ethos related stuff are always very, very high, very high. But even still, those instruments are so faulty in terms of how we're creating them, who's giving them, you know, things like that. So I would love much more like stringent, some really good data on that, you know. So that being said, our advisory program, it changes. It changes with the needs of the community. And again, because we have our first 12th grade class, we have our 12th graders where half the time in advisory, they're looking at colleges, right? And we're trying to change the narrative with them about what does it mean to even go to college, what kind of schools you're even considering, and what would it mean to find a school that matches who you are as an individual, as a learner, right? Rather than trying to go to like the other school, you know. So, other questions? Yes.
As a founder, I just want to know two things. The first one is when you hire teachers, do you have any standards of hiring teachers? So what kind of teachers can be teachers in your school? And second, as a founder, what is the biggest challenge or pressure you face? Because, you know, charter school is an independently run public school, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So the first thing is that for all, public charter schools must follow the No Child Left Behind. Many of those rules, laws are still in the books for public charter schools, which means that for all of the core content classes, teachers must hold the appropriate credential for those classes. They must be making progress toward highly qualified teacher in the same way that they would in any public school. And we have the flexibility to hire any individual to teach any class outside of that core. So, you know, science, social studies, math, English. Outside of that, we can create a class on videography and hire whomever we want. So those are some of the rules as outlined by the Department of Ed in California for charter schools. On the charter school operation side, I mean, I could bore you guys to death with the operation of a public school. Like anything, at least for us, because we're also a business, you know, the finances of it are very difficult. and I come from, I started as a substitute teacher, then a classroom teacher. As a principal, you learn how to do some site-based management, but you're basically managing money that somebody gives you. So it's very different. It's like a teenager. And then as a school operations person, I run the, you've got to figure out where those pots of monies are, when they come versus when they say they're going to come, what they're supposed to be paid, where they're supposed to go, and where you really need them to go. And you have to kind of figure out how to navigate all those things. And then, probably more difficult, is that then there's a gap. Like all the good stuff over here, right, that you want to do. Like I have a video game design class. They're doing some really crazy stuff right now. I can't even tell you half the things that they're doing. I just came from their class. They're trying to turn our current class, Dora will love this, you guys might love this. They're trying to, they made a model, they started in SketchUp and they made a model of our current high school. This is all, they're going to have a LAN party coming up pretty soon, a video game all-night party. And I've done this a couple years. There's some photos of me a couple years ago. We did a video game night from 7 p.m. to 7 a.m. I fell asleep probably after 10 or something, but we had kids playing video games all night at the high school. And so they decided this time they were going to make their own video game. So right now they started in SketchUp and they made a layout of the school. And they're doing something with GPS and their phones so that they can run around the building and then figure out how they're going to they're going to make digital contact with someone. That'll be a point value based on where you're hit. And then someone will be in the computer lab room being able to see where the blue team and the red team are running around the building. And so they're working on something like that right now. And I saw that the SketchUp version's done. They're going to drop it into Unity, the software they're using. And then they're working on some of the GPS mapping right now. So kid was showing me, was able to pull up his cell phone and then walk outside the classroom and then you can see it going out of there. So once it's done, then they're going to have their all-night video game party. So pretty awesome that they decided instead of just playing some video games, like last time they were playing Mortal Kombat and some other stuff. They were actually going to, they're building their own game for this night. So anyhow, the state doesn't fund things like that, right? So I have to figure out how to make that happen. So that's very challenging to do that. Yes, sir.
So you mentioned your interest in somebody coming along and creating a quotient for love and peace and so on. It so happens that many of the people in this room are in programs looking more at cognition and content and technology and so on. So I was wondering, especially for first and second years who are inspired by your vision and the work that's being done there and say, well, cool, I'd like to do my master's or dissertation project or some project in your school. And thinking in terms of participatory design, coming in and looking for some generative themes and grassroots ideas, what would you see as interesting projects or maybe research problems that you would be interested for, say, Sesame students to come in and work with you and develop with you at your site?
Well, I'll say this: I've had probably close to a half dozen doctoral students that have done some form of research at our school.
Sapir and Sarah from Tampa Park.
Yeah. The folks at Smash, Osmo, things like that. They've done some research at the school. The only data I have on my kids is in relationship to standardized tests right now. And I feel like there's so much more about their experience in our school that we know very, very little about. And so these things around, around motivation, desire, what kind of learning is happening? Like with these video game kids, right? What are they really learning? Or did they already come to us knowing all these things and I just gave them a computer lab room to mess around in? You know what I mean? I'm not sure really what are we contributing to their arc? we're kind of grown up now that I have kids at every grade level. We're in a place now where I want to capture, we need to sort of look at our analytics in general, and then more specifically with our sort of elective classes, what is the impact that these are having? Either on their general ed studies, on their motivation to continue their learning, on love, greater action, so that's an area. I don't know if that's directly under the umbrella of the cognitive sciences. We have had people, as Dor mentioned, I think we shared with Sneha on your, way back when I was at BTech. I have had doctoral students who actually have come to my schools with their whole product, their whole dissertation kind of already assembled and said, give me 10 kids and a space and leave me alone, essentially. And I think I gave her 12 kids and the space and I left her alone. And so she kind of conducted her research and then was collecting all the information. And it was great because our kids got to do some work in Second Life at the time. And so I think I know she built out some of the environment and the kids built out some of the environment, and she was looking at how they were modding their avatars, I think I remember correctly.
Yeah, the research questions emerged through that work, and she had a whole team of the other graduate students from the lab who came and supported her.
And they were capturing video, they were screen capturing, they were doing interviews, pre and post. So I try to be as accommodating as possible, as I would be for any one of your students. And it challenges us. It puts us in a good place of tension to see if what you're thinking would really make sense when you have kids in front of you. And in many instances, it gives the kids an opportunity to experience something, certainly in Sneha's case, an opportunity to experience a space that they wouldn't have otherwise. So that probably wasn't specific enough, but I just wanted to give that as an example that when I can, I'll move heaven and earth to make the conditions right for your research. And then selfishly, those areas that I know that we don't have valid data on. So anyhow, you guys are winding down, I can tell. I'll take a question or two more and then we can wrap up. Yes?
One of the things that I'm looking at in my own research is slightly less cognitive and much more in your love space, and that's looking at hope, and specifically how does hope change sexually risky behavior for women. And so I'm not specifically for adolescents of color. And so I'm just curious, how does sexual education happen for you guys? How do conversations around future orientation, because we can say we can get our kids to college, but getting them to stay and through, and it's very rudimentary work that I'm doing, but I'm finding that there's a lot of correlation in terms of the retention with that level of hope. And are you seeing that your kids are more hopeful moving through this space where they're given a lot more autonomy, where they're challenged to ask more questions and to take more ownership over their own educational journey?
Yeah. You probably, you guys are all quite a bit older than, it's like some of you are closer to being out of high school. I don't know if you guys realize how, I'm tormented by the things that I see and hear our 9th and 10th and 7th and 8th grade girls seeing and doing, and how hyper sexualized, and it's super intense, and it cuts race and socioeconomic, and it's unfathomable. To me, it's unfathomable. It may not be to you all. I mean, there was just something about some kids. Oh God, we could probably just go on and on with the stories that we probably know about what's happening with regard to sexual activity in digital spaces, but that it's not staying in digital spaces. And in some cases, it's taking video, Vine videos of kids going off into the bathroom together during class time. And then this is what I hear going on in this one school, where the idea is to take a Vine video of two kids somehow being physical or sexual in a bathroom, and then getting it distributed, like, and seeing like how many people can you get it distributed to, like how quickly can that happen, and then the next video. And so it's just like this, like the sense of like body and space and it being sacred and relationships and physical meaning something, right? It's just like, dude, you're from like you're from like the ancient world, you know, which is crazy. It's just, and it's sad. And wow, you guys need like a speaker series on that for sure, because it is real and it's intense, and it happens probably even in more affluent communities than it does in lower income communities, although there are a lot of low income kids trying to catch up for sure. But there's this sense of like, you guys know what I'm talking about? Or am I the only one? Right? And are you guys alarmed by it as I am? It's alarming. It's alarming.
What are you talking about?
I'm talking about like 13-year-old girls posting pictures of themselves completely naked.
Why are there just girls in the descriptions? I mean, 13-year-old boys, what are they doing?
Well, actually, thank you for
staying in school reading books.
No, thank you for
Totally fair.
No, thank you for that. I appreciate that. And what the kids that, here's how what we have caught, or the conversations we've been in, a lot of the postings have been of girls of themselves. The distribution has certainly been by the boys, like 100% of the time, 99% of the time. And that's the culture that we're experiencing and hearing, is the boys talking the girls through like, hey, send me this Vine, send me the video. And then the girls creating the video and sending it like in the middle of their school day and stuff like that. Anyway, I say all that because it's what we're dealing with in schools. And it's an issue that we're discussing in advisory. And it came to us because we caught like a group of boys who were circulating a number of videos on their phones. And this question, and I think one of the strengths of our school is the amazing women we have on staff, like the range of experiences. And I mean, there's some phenomenal, amazing women, and they lead up advisories. And that's, again, another question, like, are we moving the needle at all, given that space? Because the videos that continue to show up are of young girls primarily, you know? And this is an age where young boys are not yet they're not quite yet in that space where they're going to be showing pictures of themselves physically, frontally, things like that in this age and space. I don't know, maybe in college that changed. I mean, I'm working with the younger population right now, so that's also why I contextualize it with young girls. And then it came to our knowledge because there were a group of young boys that were circulating the information. So anyway, that's my long-winded way of saying we have some amazing advisors. I would love for you to come and make contact with some of the women there and we have a feminism class also that I would love to invite you to and sit in on them. And the professor is this amazing woman who just came from the iSchool from New York. And so I think that'd be a great question to pose to them. It'd be a phenomenal question to pose to them. Sorry about that, but you know, it's such an intense thing. I'm sorry, some other questions?
Well, I just wanted to give you, I feel like you never really gave us like a definitive sort of like definition, or you can sort of end with giving us realms definition or conceptualization of love.
Of love.
Yes. How is it that realm is using this term? Because I've seen, you've been throwing the term around a lot, and just really want to know how is it being conceptualized?
Wow, that's a good. I don't know that I've ever sort of codified it to a sentence. I would probably say it. Well, let me see. The notion of love is something that we discuss. Certainly begins for us with every adult that we bring into the building, right? Sort of as the adults working with young kids. Do you share in our vision that kids should be loved and respected and known? And what are the skills and experiences you have to help us kind of broaden that universe? is, I think, if I was going to just kind of sum it up in a sentence of what we kind of all are in conversation around. That still sounds kind of like too mythical or something. I don't know, it doesn't sound concrete enough.
You earlier used the phrase compassion. Is that related?
We used a lot of words, with the exception of love, for a long time, and I think this was part of what we were struggling with, because for so long it was a pejorative in schools. Like you really couldn't say it, or else you would get in trouble for saying, "Oh, I love my students," I think we're at a place now where we do use that word. Push back a little bit more. What am I not communicating, or how am I not capsulizing it for you?
I mean, I just want to know exactly how you're conceptualizing, how Realm as an entity is conceptualizing it, precisely because there was a comment on sort of like quantifying love, right? And so I first want to know how it's being defined, how it's conceptualized in Realm, how it's being operationalized, so that then you can go on to quantifying.
Well, I don't know that we've ever, I guess I can say then, that it's ever been conceptualized to a sentence, I know that in nearly every conversation we have, that's the place that we begin first, right? Like, what impact is this going to have on our interaction with young kids? Whether it's choosing a textbook, hiring staff, scripting out the curriculum for the advisory session, and it's something that we mention in every one of those conversations. And again, it's not something that we've codified to a particular sentence. So the kinds of conversations we have on it around love specifically, like, will it strengthen our relationships with kids? Will it help us to know the young kid a little bit better, and they knowing us better? I think is a big part of the. So is the relationship reciprocated? We do some of the cheesy things, like in our advisories, we have these kind of love, grit, and action awards, and in that context, love is discussed as a compassion, like you were caught being good or doing things like that. There's actually that, sort of award. So I guess it's institutionalized that way a little bit in some of the quarterly awards that we have, our love, grit, and action awards. I don't know. I still feel like I'm not like delivering the thing for you. I guess I don't have I'll have to work on that.
So if I were to go on the website, like, there wouldn't be a definition of like how, for example, love, grit, and action are conceptualized and defined.
Well, there's this grid of what love looks like in the school, the culture, with parents. Like, there's specific like bullets of what does love look like with parents, for example. And we have like some examples of what that looks like. So yeah, I have the PDF on it, but I don't mean that to lessen the. I appreciate that you're. This is the question I'll think about when I'm driving home, for sure.
I remember in the classroom of the Realm Charter School, there were some posters or the papers. There are some explanations maybe about love, grit, and action. I remember lots of.
You're right. There is.
Yeah.
Yeah. There is. Yes, there is, and I don't even remember what that is now. But you're absolutely right. There's.
I take pictures for all the explanations of love, grit, and action.
Yeah. You're right. There is. I guess there is the codified sentence that I guess I was. Yeah, maybe that's the thing. I don't even remember what that says, honestly. I don't know why I don't remember it. Yeah. There is something for love, grit, and action. I'll see if that's probably on the website. Yeah, it's been automated to a website in a PDF now. No, I don't mean that. I guess I was just kind of like not thinking about that in the form of a sentence. And maybe I initially took your question as it meaning like in all of the spaces, where does it live, I guess, is probably how I wanted to respond to it.
Well, not to reduce it to a sentence, just to get I wanted to get a very clear sense of how that
Well, I have homework now. If you want, if you want to give me your email, I will think about that more deeply, and I will respond more appropriately. Yeah, and I like the different, like the if-then things that you put that in also. You know, I think that's also why there's been some disconnect between, and we have struggled with what that means across the culture of the school, and then what actually happens in the spaces that we have tried to operationalize it, like advisory. You know, yeah.
Kind of talking within this framework, I guess like what is your ideal teacher? What type of characteristics do you look within that teacher?
I definitely like someone who, you know, in our interviews, first of all, in our interviews, I'm on a panel usually with other principals and other people, and I almost always like go off script like within like 30 seconds of the interview, and they really hate me for that, but I can kind of tell right away if I want the person in the building or not. And it's usually like the conviction at which they're speaking about the things that they're talking about. Yeah, there's a lot that comes alive in the conviction when they're talking about their own work. And the work that they've done previously with kids specifically, I like to kind of look for that, sort of the intangible things around that. I love someone who there was this guy who I really wanted, my team didn't want him, and I kind of got outvoted. But this guy was a lover of literature, and he just had a really great repertoire of books that he knew and that he'd worked with kids and could give specific examples. And he talked with so much fire, like I loved him. And we go through a process of the interview, and then there's a demo lesson that the teachers do. I thought his demo lesson was great, but the others didn't. So I was outvoted in his case. His affect was a little bit more subdued the second time. I think that's what put them off a little bit. So there's the questions about the practice. There's a lot of questions about their relationships with kids, their relationships with staff, and the notion of love and grit and action is really one that we also discuss among one another. I do have a rubric that I've been working on that I think has a lot of value around teacher evaluation, and there's a column in there that we've called love that looks at specific areas that teachers demonstrate what love looks like in the classroom, in their planning, in their collaboration with students and things like that, as a way to quantify like what do those things look like. So things like proximity when they're talking to a kid, things that are observable as another tool. It's at 5:30, yes, I went over, sorry. So thank you for having me. Thank you for the questions. Thank you for sharing with me in the conversation. I would love to hear from any of you all that do have some research interests, for sure. Okay, so thank you all. Thank you.